I'll tell you the tale of Thurmond in West Virginia. Oh. It was a once thriving place, and it is now a ghost town. This is what it is. That was it in 1945. I've got some Americans in today, they're looking at this going, oh, home, I'm feeling homesick. The Thurmond train depot, approximately 152 feet long, 16 feet wide at the base, is situated along a set of 3 tracks. There it is today. To get to Thurmond, you start on Glen Jean, built by and once home to Thomas McKell, who will become important to the tale. He was a formidable coal baron and businessman who brought up all the land in this area, right up to the western shore of the New River, immediately opposite Thurmond, and he named Glen Jean for his wife, Jean Dunn, who had given him 12,500 acres of coal fields. So he kind of ended up as this really wealthy fella. By driving 7 miles up the winding but paved Thurmond Road, crossing and recrossing Dunlop Creek along the way, one arrives at the eerily deserted town. From what was once the suburb of Dunglen, you cross into Thurmond by a very old 2-lane bridge. One lane is for cars, the other is for trains. This is the bridge. In the distance, W.D. Thurmond's, we'll come to him in a minute, bank and several of the other main buildings continue to stand proudly, bordering the train tracks just as before. So from another angle there. As one of the most fascinating structures in Thurmond is this well-preserved 70-foot-tall coal loader. Back in the steam days, trains would pull directly underneath through the large opening and stop to fill up with coal. Further down the track, there were 2 large water tanks. Coal and water, the staples of the steam age, were available in abundance in Little Thurmond. And more trains passed through this town for servicing in the late 1800s and early 1900s than in any other industrial cities of the day. This little building, believe it or not, is the Thurmond Town Hall. Just think that's quite crazy. This is Big Mike, a Canoa class locomotive plied by the C&O, that's the Chesapeake and Ohio tracks, through Thurmond and elsewhere for many years. Now we come to this guy. The town of Thurmond was no more than a man's dream in April of 1873 when Captain William Dabney Thurmond, what a name, received 73 acres of land as payment for his services as a surveyor. He was also apparently a little bit of a war hero. That same year, the C&O Railway opened its main line from the Atlantic coast to the Ohio River. So he's got all this land, and then this happens. 10 years later, the freight station was built at Thurmond, and soon after, a railroad bridge was completed to connect the coal mines across New River with the main line. So all these coal mines on the other side of the river became connected. This town is about to really blossom. Land adjacent to Thurmond became an assembly yard for transportation operations in the gorge. As more spare lines reached outlying coal mines, the site grew into a town to meet the needs of the coal companies and their workers. During its heyday, 150 to 200 men worked for the rail operations at Thurmond, keeping coal supplied to the growing industries of the nation. Coal from southwest Virginia heated cities, forged steel, and powered the steam engines of ships, trains, and factories. And just as the railroad shipped coal out of the gorge to the rest of the nation, it also brought goods from outside world into Thurmond. The Hudson Wholesale Fruit and Produce Company received carload shipments several times a week and made daily deliveries to area stores. The Armour Company Distribution Center shipped wholesale meats up and down the rail line. And the town's steam engine repair shop was one of the primary reasons for its success. This is a real hub now. By 1910, Thurmond was producing $4.8 million of freight revenue for the C&O Railroad. The amount collected was 20% of the entire railroad's revenue and was 10 times more than the Richmond and over 2 times more than Cincinnati. Now then, the Hotel Thurmond was built in 1891 as a simple frame construction. It contained 25 guest rooms and was the first lodging business to operate in Thurmond. Its role servicing those arriving by rail was evident in its placement directly abutting the tracks. In 1901, Hotel Thurmond was replaced by the Lafayette Hotel, pronounced lay flat by locals. The Dunglen Hotel, the first major hospitality competitor in Thurmond, which was built across the river, which we'll come to, was also completed in 1901, making it likely that the Lafayette, this update, was a response to the erection of this Dunglen Hotel over the river. An orchestra came from Cincinnati to play at the opening of this new hotel across the river, this Dunglen. The train also brought traveling men, businessmen, gamblers, adventurers, and soon-to-be brides to the town. And for New River miners seeking to escape from a drab coal town, Thurmond was a short train ride away. And according to local resident Herman Monk, the sidewalk looked like Broadway there on Saturday night. The Lafayette boasted 35 guest rooms, 7 bathrooms, steam heat, and 400 electric lights. The ground floor also operated as a storefront for several businesses, including Thurmond's post office. However, these amenities still paled in comparison to the 100 guest room Dunglen and its reputation for Epicurean extravagance. It was a large 4.5-story wood frame building with a wraparound first floor veranda. It housed not only 100 rooms, but an ice plant, barbershop, laundry, post office, and bar. Thurmond is a tale of 2 hotels. The Hotel Lafayette, and this one across the river, the Hotel Dunglen. Thurmond is also a tale of 2 men. Captain William Dabney Thurmond, the guy that we mentioned earlier, who basically started up this town, and I had to put his full name in because it tickled me, Thomas Gaylord McKell. He would have got such stick in our schooling. But we'll see what's going on. Thurmond was originally envisioned to be a hard-working religious community. As it happens, this guy, the one who started it, Captain W.D. Thurmond, was a staunch Baptist. He abhorred drinking and gambling to the point of banning it throughout his town. Never want to miss a business opportunity, Thomas McKell at the western bank of Thurmond reclassified to be part of Glen Jean, which is 7 miles away, and promptly built the imposing and almost legendary Dunglen Hotel. So the Dunglen was across the river, but it was still under the law of Thurmond, which meant you couldn't do drinking and all these other things. So he had his little town, didn't he, that he built in honor of his wife, who left him all that land. And he just put it so that this hotel was within his jurisdiction. So then he was free to operate it as he pleased. As we said, it featured 100 rooms, restaurants, a ballroom, dances, big city orchestras, and not least drinking, gambling, and prostitution. Needless to say, the Dunglen Hotel thrived, and Captain Thurmond and Mr. McKell became bitter enemies. One commentator noted, within Thurmond on the northeast side of the river, the town was quiet, proper, and businesslike. On the southwest side, hundreds of people poured into town every weekend for the parties, dances, poker games, and other entertainment. Thurmond, West Virginia, is often termed the Dodge City of the East, thanks in part to the 100-room Dunglen Hotel, whose bar never closed. The world's longest-running continuous poker game, as reported by Ripley's Believe It or Not, was held at the Dunglen Hotel. You won't believe how long it lasted. Have a little guess in your head. It lasted 14 years and ended only when the hotel burned to the ground in 1930. That's a long poker game, isn't it? In one well-remembered poker game, a New River operator lost his coal mine. This is somebody writing. When my grandfather went up there to see about this hotel job, said George Carper of Cincinnati, Ohio, whose grandfather, George Flatts, was the barber at the Dunglen Hotel. He went up to see what the job would be like, and he stepped off the train, and he said he almost stepped on a dead body, and it was the body of a union organizer. Dunglen, in addition to the usual barbershop, bank, and other businesses, actually included a mortuary in the basement. One commentator suggested that this was in part due to the excesses practiced at the hotel. It was also due to murders and such things, but people would just drink themselves stupid. There was a mortuary in the basement. Historical commentary, women booze, dice and cards. The only way in and out of the town of 500 hardy souls was via the railroad, as there were no roads in those days. Women booze, dice and cards were brought in fresh every day, while unlucky losers of arguments over the same were quietly disposed of in the New River. A popular expression in the early 1900s was, the only difference between hell and Thurmond is that a river runs through Thurmond. And the quote obviously applied to the McKell side of town, and it likely vexed Captain Thurmond to no end. And this is a poem that was written by a C&O conductor. You've heard of the California gold rush way back in 49, but Thurmond on New River will beat it every time. There's people here from everywhere, the colored and the white. Some mother's son bites the dust almost every night. On payday, they come to Thurmond with a goodly roll of bills. Some gamblers get their dough and they sneak back to the hills. Some, though, ne'er return. Alas, when they meet a thug, we find them on the railroad track or in the Thurmond jug. Where handy is the blackjack and the price of life is low. At Thurmond on New River along the C&O. Poor men are often missing after the drinkers fight, and the crime laid on the river and the trains that pass at night. How sad that this is what became of Thurmond. But people got what they desired, didn't they? He gave them exactly what they wanted, and what we had was death and corruption. Its importance started to deteriorate when roads arrived in 1917. Around that time, two major fires, one that burned through the south side of Thurmond, 22, and the Dunglen Hotel fire in 30, destroyed much of the town's infrastructure. Many establishments moved away. And the final blow to the rail industry in Thurmond came in 49 when the C&O company purchased its first diesel engine and began phasing out its steam engines. So, bear in mind that tale. This week, Yehovah will give a blueprint which outlines what behaviors and what attitudes it is that lead to blessing. A blueprint for a nation, for a society to flourish. In next week's parsha, we read, "See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse." This word "see," re'eh, it's not just look, it's actually take the effort to understand and perceive. We're invited to make an effort to see, to perceive, to look at intently, to consider. This is not passive. This is a call to give careful attention in order to see, where see is used in the sense of understanding. What are we careful to see? I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you obey the commandments of Yehovah, which I command you today, and the curse if you do not obey the commandments of Yehovah your God, but turn aside from the way that I am commanding you today to go after other gods that you have not known. Same blessing and curse of Deuteronomy 11 is also spelled out later in Deuteronomy. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life that you and your offspring may live, loving Yehovah your God, obeying his voice and holding fast to him. For he is your life and length of days, that you may dwell in the land of Yehovah swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, to give them. Blessings and curses. Throughout the scripture we see these associations. Blessings, obedience, life, Yehovah. Curse, disobedience, death. So why do people go astray? Why do they choose sin? It's because it's what they want. Trouble is, they want the blessings as well. They want the peace, the prosperity, the joy. But the fruit of going after the flesh is not life and peace. It is death. But blessed is the man who reigns steadfast under trial, who endures temptation. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. It's the genuineness of our repentance and faith that is tested. And let no one say when he is tempted, I'm being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. Each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. As we read before, when desire is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's fully grown, brings forth death. And when temptation comes, when you're tested, do you give in to desire? Do you disobey and make excuses? 1 Corinthians 10 says, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. Beloved, don't be surprised at the fiery trial, the trial that tested character, when it comes upon you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. And 1 Peter 1, wherein you greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, you are in heaviness through many trials or temptations, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perishes, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Those with a rebellious heart, something will come along that will cause them to stumble. Let's just go over the river. Let's go over there. That looks fun. They will be at odds with the word of Yehovah. They will seek to twist it to make it fit whatever it is that they're comfortable with. That's just what happens. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. They'll find a way to circumvent Jehovah's word and still try and hold on to the promises. They will turn their ear from listening to the voice of Jehovah, and they will fall. Those who are genuine will remain surrendered, holding fast to the word, looking to Jehovah, grateful for the abundance of blessings, worshiping him in humility, and they will know life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To him who overcomes, I will give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God.